All right. Hi, everybody. This is Ruthie Hannah with Breaking the Glass. And we are here for our How Remote Work Impacts Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to take a few moments for everyone to get signed in. And my colleague Elizabeth Lamb is going to put some links in the chat box for you to follow us on LinkedIn or check out our website where you can see our recordings for our previous webinar about remote work and this one as well once we publish it. We also have a newsletter sign up, and you can sign up for our newsletter and we will send you all of our events and different things that we have going on in our community. Breaking the Glass is a program of computer futures that was started about 5 years ago by senior leadership to address gender disparity in tech leadership. And we're really grateful that you're here during this time while we're having this switch to virtual programming, and we're hoping to continue it after this time is over too. One note about the chat box, typically chat is on, so if you go, you'll see there's different options of who you can send your chat to. Typically, it gets defaulted to all panelists, but if you want to talk to all panelists and attendees, you can press the arrow and then select whoever you would like to send your chat to. If you wouldn't mind, type what city you're from in the comments, and if you're from a country outside the US, include the country too, just so we can know where our attendees are coming from. Austin, Denver, Austin, Richmond, Washington. Cool. Ooh, Malta, Europe. I think you're our first person from Malta. That's awesome. All right, great. So next week, we will be having an interview with the founders of Crikey, two sisters who founded a augmented reality mobile gaming app, and that will be Wednesday the 22nd at 1 p.m. CST. And we are putting a link for that in the chat box as well, so be sure to check that out. On the 29th, we're also going to be doing a small limited space workshop, and if we get enough interest, we'll do two, about how remote work and this kind of experiment has affected you. What are the pros, what are the cons? Do you think your company will continue doing it? Do you think they won't? So stay tuned for that, and we will send details out to our LinkedIn page and by our website as well. So I think those are all of my things. And as our panelists speaking, please feel free to send through any questions that you might have. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end of the panel. So with that, I'm going to introduce Samantha Shobi. She is from our East Coast office for Computer Futures. And she is a, let me get this right, senior Salesforce recruitment specialist. And she's also very interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, and she's been on our advisory board for 3 years. And she's going to introduce you to our panel. Sammy?
Hey everyone, and thank you, Ruthie. Really excited to be here. Love BTG, and excited to be actually hosting or moderating our first panel here. So I'm gonna go through and introduce everybody speaking today. No particular order, but ladies, when I say your name, will you give everybody a little wave, show who's who as we're going through everything. So we will start with Marlene Summers, who is the VP of Global Product Support at Velocity, the fastest growing ISV on the Salesforce App Exchange, and also a highly recognized leader in the SaaS space as well, and somebody who speaks around the world, talking about customer support and success and how all of that deals with technology. More can be found on all of that programming, I'm sure, on marlenespeaks.com. Next speaker we have here is Terry Bastian. And she is a business analyst and a Salesforce consultant who most recently was with Anthem. She's been working remotely for over 10 years, ranging everywhere from managing a multilingual global team, and most recently was on a US-based Scrum team, very passionate about remote work because she gets to work with people all over the world from somewhere she loves. And then next on we have Maggie Welch, a self-employed digital marketing consultant who is passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion in all things marketing, both internally and externally. And she has a master's in race and gender studies and currently runs and manages a team completely remotely. And last, and of course not least, is Ellen Williams, aka the Data Chick, who is the Director of Advisory Services at Orion Global Solutions. She has been an on and off remote worker for the past 25 years, working with hundreds of clients on digital transformation projects of all sorts. And she's also a professional speaker discussing sales, marketing, and technology for a number of business owners. So that's kind of everyone speaking today. I'm really excited to hear from everybody. Just quick disclaimer before we really kick it off is all opinions from panelists are their own and not necessarily the views of their employer, but we are excited to have their personal opinions here with us. So thank you all for joining today. We're gonna just kind of jump right into it. Basically, we're here today to chat around how remote work impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion. So from here, I figure we're going to start just by, I think, jumping into, does anyone have the first thing that comes to mind as a positive that remote can impact in this diversity, equity, or inclusion space?
Yeah, I think that's why we're all here, is that we see the positive. What I think is one of the most immediate positive impacts is the removal of bias. So if you take things out of a physical working space where everybody's coming in, they're walking in, they're taking themselves into an office, into a space that has been created for a community and not necessarily for certain abilities. So yeah, I think working from home and working remotely allows each of your team members to control their comfortable space and remove bias that they might encounter if they're going into a workspace.
I think another really good benefit, a strong benefit of the remote is you get that quiet time. For someone like myself, business analyst, also an introvert, I really like to get the information that I need from my customers, whoever they might be, and then I've got my quiet time to kind of sit and think and do my work. And in an office environment, you don't necessarily get that. You might be able to get yourself a conference room or something to close everything off, but you have that when you work from home. You've automatically got that nice quiet space to work.
I love, Terry, that you just mentioned customers, because in reflecting and preparing for this panel, one of the things that became apparent to me working in any customer facing role, say in the past 15 years in my career, your customers, when you're in software, a lot of our businesses are actually remote. So we're looking at this now and we have this world shift and it's like, whoa, is this new thing? Is it going to work out? Our company's going to let us do this, later on down the road. But if you think about too, if you're in a customer facing role, how much time should you be spending just internally with people in an office versus out with your base? And so I think just even changing our mind about how we think about who we work with, we're actually been doing this. We haven't just thought about it in the same way. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities now for companies to really reflect on what is the need to have people's chairs right there and everybody be there when we've moved to this much more flexible thing that gives lots of different people all over the world the ability to participate and add their value.
I think also on a personal level, there's no commute, right? So you can do your 8 hours of work and then you're instantly available to manage the other aspects of your own life, that you don't have to get on a train or get in a car or a bus or however you would commute to the office. And it allows you more time to balance, for lack of a better word, work and family.
Awesome. Great points all around. And I think, Ellen, on that note, one of the things that we've spoken about some as a panel is the idea of the unpaid hour, which is something that's cited as a reason for some aspects of inequality in the workplace. And that unpaid hour is things like childcare, taking care of aging parents, housework, and things like that. And that's often attributed to women having more unpaid hours of work on their plate that they have to deal with. So I think this is a really great question around how does remote work impact that unpaid hour, and is it for the best, or maybe not?
I have actually a funny story that I could kick that off with. Years ago at my previous job, my first week, my job was literally, the office was a half a mile from my house. So at lunch, I didn't really have any friends. So I'm like, oh, I'll just go home and eat lunch and come back. And then my now ex-husband at the time, that night, he asked me, oh, if you were home, why didn't you do the dishes? And that was the last time I went home at lunch. I was like, forget it. I'm not going home at lunch. But fast forward to now, as a single mother, if I didn't, forget COVID, but if I didn't just in my career be able to develop the ability to have flexibility, I wouldn't be able to do any of it. I mean, I wouldn't even be doing this job. Like, it would be a bit impossible. And like the technology and the openness and acceptance of that has made that possible for someone like me in my position. But I think it should be accessible for all people, whether you're starting out, whether you're, 20 years in, and then just around the world. If we can provide the technology and provide people with the accountability, then we're going to get the best business and, economic results possible, which is what any company wants and what non-profit companies want, just for, making the world a better place.
Yeah, it could definitely be challenging as well. If you have the opportunity to work remotely and not have to stick to that 8 to 5, 9 to 5 schedule, then certainly flexibility comes into play. And depending on what your role is in your organization, or if you're a consultant, or whatever allows you to work remotely, it also allows you to be there at the moments that those family members require it, right? If you're taking care of children, if you're taking care of, a parent, but there's challenges with that too, right? So you have to put boundaries as best as you can. But I think the flexibility can be the thing that really makes remote work more appealing.
Awesome. Thank you both for that. And then I think, on a similar note, but I think one of the things that we spoke about was commute and these certain other aspects that remote work just takes away. We don't have to be in an office, like Maggie said earlier. You don't have to deal with potential discrimination or biases or anything along those lines. How do you guys see remote work affecting both seen and unseen conditions that people may be working with, maybe different abilities or different races or things along these lines, neurodiversity? How does remote work kind of improve things in that regard, work-wise?
I think if you're not using video, so we're all using video today, we can see each other. You can see our backgrounds. You kind of make opinions about, what you see. I think, like for myself, where I worked a lot with Europe and with India, we tended not to use video because it impacted the bandwidth in a negative way. And so in a way it was good, in a way it wasn't, because you had absolutely no idea what was what was going on with the person that you were talking to, as far as what are they wearing today? Are they happy? Are they sad? So, you're a little bit distracted, I think, by it's always going on in the back of your head, like, oh, what's going on? But at the same time, it does erase a lot of that potential prejudice, because you hear an accent, but you don't know what it is. It's a British accent. Well, okay, so you think they're from Britain. They might be sitting in India. They might be sitting in Australia. They might be sitting in Chile. So I think it's the video, even in a way, it's good because it brings you closer. But I think even the video, in some cases, can introduce another layer of, and I don't want to necessarily say prejudice, but it's just another layer of complexity.
I think one thing too, specifically to DEI, and something that I think has been really a cool output of the current situation, are the virtual happy hours, in that it replaces having to go to like a physical place, like a bar or a party scene, which can be extremely upsetting for people that are introverts. For women, like I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I've loved being at events and tech. It's mostly men. Sometimes it's super fun. I've also chose not to go to events that I just think I don't want to do this. I don't want to be with these people. And I'm not in sales. So I'm like, oh, cool. I don't have to go sell. But for women that are in sales, I mean, that is a big deal. And so now they don't exist and you're not excluded from the circle, but you could do other kind of replacements, either with or without video or just some kind of way to stay connected to people, but not have to put yourself in a physical environment that you don't want to be in.
Or even with those virtual happy hours, choosing your drink. Some people feel so compelled when they go to happy hours with work that they have to hang and they have to conform to what is societally okay. But there are a lot of people who are sober in our nation and across the world. And that is some undue pressure that's lifted. And I think just that alone, if that's one thing, I mean, you can just compound how many things positively impact someone who is not having to walk into an uncomfortable space.
On a slightly different note, we do a lot of work with consultants. So we've done a lot of remote work at Orion prior to the situation we're in now. And one of our consultants is blind. And it works really well for her to work remotely. She does a lot of the client interviews for our request for proposals and for our discovery. She's able to gather all that content and write it up. So I'm left just editing and not having to do all that work. And remote is excellent for her because she doesn't have to find a way to get herself to the client. She can work from home, she can work efficiently, and she does a great job. So it's really enabled us to bring the best people to the team, regardless of any of the, hurdles that they may have in working. Remote really takes some of those hurdles away.
Yeah, similarly along those lines too, you have people with different permanent abilities and then also temporarily. So we talked earlier about sort of caring for children or caring for a parent or something like that. But also just in my own experience, I had an employee who got diagnosed with a very severe form of cancer in a young man. And so obviously has to go through a lot of things and be on leave. And then after that point, it's not like you just pop back in and, ready to go full steam. And this was in China. So it wasn't common to work remote. Because even a couple of years ago, it's just, there's internet problems. There's more of like a tradition of being in the office and showing, your face. But we were able to accommodate him and now be able and still continue to do that as he recovers. And so that's things too, people are going to have different things throughout their life. And we don't want to lose out by having to force employees to be somewhere when they can still add value. And also for someone to, when they're as part of their recovery, to have something else to focus on and not just have to be in that place, I think was just really impactful for him.
And that gives so much value to him as an employee too, that your company, the entity itself is willing to wait and put that investment into him as a worker, as a valuable, part of your operating system. I mean, that's got to feel amazing during his recovery. So.
That's an awesome point. And actually, I think a few of the things that we've spoken about are now making me think about, right now we're all working remote if we want to be or not. I might not be the world's biggest, I'm a huge fan of remote work, though I see all of the beauty in it. But what steps can be done to continue to build an inclusive team culture, especially as we're moving forward and teams might not all be remote and they might be partially together in an office and some people are remote, which I think is going to be something we're seeing more of. How can you still have an inclusive team culture together if parts might be and parts might be remote?
I'll go ahead and say something about that. I think it's all about connection to each other. So even though you're not physically in the same space as each other, you can appreciate the person for the individuality they bring to the table. So like when I start off a meeting or end a meeting, I've been in various situations where you start the meeting and you give a 1 minute, one good thing that's happening to you. And so everybody around the room does that. And so they're giving a little bit of themselves. They're sharing some positivity and giving some individuality to the space. I've also been in teams where at the end of it, we say something we're grateful for. So thank you, Samantha, for moderating the panel today. And like that, I mean, you smile. Like it feels good to have some sort of connection, even though we're not in the same physical space, but to acknowledge each individual and what they bring to the table, not necessarily work-wise, but personality-wise, characteristic-wise, culturally. I think you can keep that with these small little measures that aren't super costly. They're actually just inviting people to bring their whole selves to the table, or at least the selves that they're comfortable bringing. So
I think you can also leverage different types of technologies. So certainly video conferencing has value when you have people in different locations so that they can see each other, whether they decide to show their background or not, right? Because some tools allow you to put faux backgrounds. We were sort of playing with some of those earlier today. But also you have instant messaging and email and text messaging and a lot of ways in which you can have private conversations and start to develop one-on-one relationships with people, even though you aren't in the same location. And you know, that happened today. We posted a blog yesterday and my whole team emailed and said, wow, you know, this was a really nice blog. And then on the side, I got some personal conversations about it on a different tool. So I think if you're leveraging the technology that's available to help to communicate, you can communicate in a lot of different ways in groups and one-on-one.
I think there is a potential that as we go back to the new old normal way, there could be some friction, and it kind of comes up. I think all of us were like, yay, remote work, it's amazing. But there has been a lot of like companies and cultures, and especially in management, where people get freaked out, and they get freaked out because they feel like they don't have control over what the people are doing. And are they really working? Are they really being productive? And so there's a whole aspect that's just, and it's not specific to remote work, but it's just about performance management. But then what happened with individuals on a team, if there's people that are always in the office and then they're the other people, how do we feel that we're all participating equally? And that really does come down to leadership, making people, individuals accountable, making teams accountable, and then having people kind of shift their mindset, because it's very easy to be an office employee and get nothing done. I've seen it happen. You can do lots of walks, you can do lots of coffee breaks, you're sitting in the break room all the time. So I think everybody knows that mentally, but it's still hard for some people, you know, to process it. I have a colleague who is in a leadership position, and everybody that reports to his boss is in leadership. Every morning and every evening, they're checking in and out on a Slack channel. I mean, it's friendly, but he's the guy's scared. He's just control. He wants to feel like in control. And so, yeah, there's some people that I think need, even in management, like they need that little thing. But I think over time, as you build trust, like I trust people, but I also verify it. So it's not an open freedom to do, especially if you're in and I'm running support, like I need people to be available at certain times to make sure we have coverage. And so, yeah, you can go walk the dog, but if you're going to be gone for 4 hours to do something, like we want to make sure we have a conversation about that and make sure we're covered.
It sounds like a lot of the advice around all of that seems to be communication, and however that might look, if it's through technology or not, it sounds like that's kind of the theme of how do these things work is have that open dialogue and that communication and everything. So I don't
think that's unique to remote work though, right?
No, definitely not. But I think it's how you keep, the technology is there, but the technology doesn't solve the root of all of it. Is still the communication side of it, is I think what comes out of that. Technology lets us be in different places, then it's on us to bring the communication pieces together.
And that's why I think the structure, you know, you've got to have communication, but you've And the kind of the ad hoc communication is great, but I think, you know, if you are working with a virtual team, you've got to have some structure. You've got to have some expectations. You know, you're talking about, you know, the goal setting. Make sure that things are measurable, and you've got to measure something, because like Marlene was saying, yeah, you know, I've worked with those people too, or, you know, they take a lot of coffee breaks and go out and smoke a lot of cigarettes, and you know what's happening at the end of the day. Where me as a remote person, you know, I'm self-disciplined, I have a structure, I have a schedule, and I can be very productive. I know when I'm going to have my team meetings, I know when I'm going to meet with my customers. So there's, you know, a certain predictability as well as an element of unpredictability. But I think, you know, the communication is key, but also the structure. You've got to have structure to, unless you're an artist or you know, somebody that you thrive on not structure. But I think for your normal remote work, for the people on the panel, it's good. It's good to have expectations and to know what's expected of you.
Great point. Awesome. And obviously Computer Futures and myself, I'm also coming at this from, I'm working with a lot of different clients, and I think about this in the recruitment space and hiring, and not just how do you work, but how do you hire somebody new and onboard them. So I'm sure a lot of you have been hired remotely or managing remotely. What's something that comes to mind for you guys as really important or different about a remote interviewing and onboarding process compared to the in-person side of things?
So for me, I mean, I've done, you know, I hired an entire team on another continent. So, and everything was over the phone. We didn't have any video, everything was phone. So one of the things I think is key, and this is whether you're, you know, you have video or not, is you have to establish some kind of rapport with that person. So, and I don't care, even in an in-person interview, I mean, people are uncomfortable. They're in an interview situation. They don't know what is going to be asked. They don't know how they're going to be judged. So what I always try to do in my interviews is just kind of start off with a little bit of chit chat. Yes, different things are legal and illegal in different countries, so you have to be aware of your local laws. But you know, you can talk to them about their background. You can bring up something about their previous employment. I know I had one woman that I hired, she used to work on a cruise ship. And I'm wondering, wow, she's got an architectural degree, she was working on a cruise ship, and now she wants to join my team as a business analyst. How does this work? Yeah. So, you know, I used that as an introduction, and we just chatted. And what it told me about her as a person is that she was a very, very good communicator. And in the team that I was hiring, I needed very good communicators. She was going to be working with people that spoke all different flavors of English. And I needed her to be outgoing. I needed her to be very friendly. So just by kind of opening up the interview with a little bit of friendliness, I was able to put her at ease. She saw me as a person and not just as a boss, but as a human being who also had likes and dislikes. And, you know, so I think that's something I don't see a lot of, and I don't think in very many of the interviews that I've had, that where I've been interviewed, people haven't tried to make me feel comfortable necessarily. They just want to jump right in and start asking the questions because they want to get on to the next topic. But if you just take even 3 minutes, just get to know the person a little bit, put them at their ease, especially in remote, because you really need to make sure that person can communicate well.
And I think one of the, oh, go ahead, Maggie.
Well, I was just going to piggyback and say empathy on that. I mean, if you're giving someone empathy, you also probably want it in return. So building that bridge early of empathy and repertoire and making that connection, I mean, I think that sustains itself for a long while. But you go ahead, Marlon.
Yeah, and totally connected to empathy. I think there's so many opportunities to improve recruiting and interviewing in general, and that could now actually help to foster diversity of talent, not just if they're remote, but just of talent in general, particularly with software interviewing, where maybe after a phone screen, the next thing is to come on site for a grueling 8-hour day which usually then actually takes a long time to set up because all the very important people are very busy. So that just wastes time. And then those candidates have to come in and be subjected to that. And while there's some people that will flourish under that, there's lots of different people, including myself, which will not flourish under that. It's exhausting. And then you're just losing out on people. And so now, like, I'm hoping, just even for my own recruiting, that we can speed things along, because you could just do, like, 45-minute Zooms with one person, someone else later on, whatever. Make it flexible that the candidate doesn't have to commute and waste their whole day. Also, candidates that have jobs couldn't, I mean, it took me a while to get a new job. I couldn't get a new job because I had a job and I couldn't leave that job to go interview. So it was really hard, right? So I think this will just hopefully open up the horizons and open up the market so that we can actually bring in talent on schedules that make more sense for people.
Exactly. And imagine being hourly on top of taking off time just for the interview. You're probably having to commute if you have to go on site. And on top of all the time that takes, you're also just now aren't making any money at all during any of it. And that's, let's say, for most people, not really anybody's favorite thing to have to face. Do I try to make a few more dollars an hour but lose half a day's paycheck for, to go meet with them? So I think there's a lot of pros to the remote interviewing and everything on that. Any other notes or comments on that? I think we're kind of getting close towards our Q&A portion from our audience. So do we have any other notes to say before we kind of jump into that side of things?
Let's go for it. Questions. Yeah. I see a bunch of them.
I know. I've seen so many coming through. I'm trying to pull through any of these things. Let's see.
I did see one about someone was saying, with technology, if you have a certain number of devices in your house, like one household computer, and then you have kids now that need computers and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely face that. I have a lot of children. I have 4 children, and only one had my personal laptop. And I was like, oh no, I need more laptops. So I went and got Chromebooks because they're more affordable than other things. But I know a lot of people can't just go out and buy expensive things. But I do hope that, this type of what's happening now in the world, there are so many devices out there. There's so many recycled devices. There are things that our companies, after 2 or 3 years, people move on. And so the same way that cell phones, kind of became ubiquitous and everybody starts, will have different levels of affordability. If we can get, any types of laptops into different households, so it does become something that we move away from the household computer and into more like the cell phone mentality, I think that will really help open it up and make it accessible for people on all sides of the economic spectrum. It's not gonna happen overnight. But I think if we just, kind of think forward like that, that will help us along that way.
And I think I also saw, to piggyback off of that, a similar question as well, was what other ways might privilege impact the working from home situation, and how do we combat that? I think, Marlene, that, working on recycled laptops and things like that are a great suggestion. What else might be out there to kind of help combat that?
I can speak to personal experience. When I was first getting started, in freelance writing, so at the very early stages of my career, I went to the library to print things or to get better internet. There are resources out there that may seem daunting at first, but they are there and they're meant to be public use. And I think just a little bit of forethought and a little bit of planning, you can use those resources. I actually still print at the library, when I need stuff printed now, which is few and far between, because luckily we're in such a digital space. But those forms you got to fill out for the state or whatever. So I don't have a printer at home because I know that those resources are out there. Or I love co-working spaces. That's my preferred place to work. Right now I'm at home, but co-working spaces you can find will give you a free day pass. Sometimes once a month, a free day pass. They'll also offer, if you follow them on social, you'll see workshops and such. There's lots of free resources that you can tap into, and then that's free networking. So you can find clients by going to, you know, a happy hour that's essentially free, and find probably a new client or a new network connection. So I think a little bit of looking, and you can find those strategic free resources. And they don't obviously, you know, there are certain woes to each of those, depending on abilities or, you know, varying walks of life, right? But if you find the right one, I mean, there's so many out there. Like even just going to the library, it's going to be an ADA compliant building. So just a little bit of planning, and you can find the resources that work for your particular situation.
Nice.
Yeah, I think internet access to, in addition to having a device in the house, the internet access becomes into play definitely in other countries around the world, where especially years ago, it wasn't as popular or as affordable or as robust. I've kind of seen it shift throughout my career. So early, when I started in 2000, yeah, you had, you know, the dial-up, but you couldn't really do your work. So she was doing enterprise software. It didn't work good. Then it got better enough. And so the company's like, oh, I'll pay you to have home internet, because then you can, you know, work not just from home, but you just do it at night and it'd be better. But then it became in the US just popular that everyone is going to, you know, mostly have internet. Then the company's like, oh, I'm not going to pay for it anymore unless you're a remote employee. And so that's kind of like, and now I think you find both buckets in the US, you know, but typically my experience, if you're an office located person, they're not going to pay for remote type of expenses. And now this world is different right now. I think in other countries overseas, it's similar. They're at the point where, well, you know, you can have it if you want, but we're not going to pay for it. And I think if companies moved away of like, we're going to provide this to you as an employee benefit, because it's actually, remote employees are cheaper than real employees, because office space everywhere is so expensive when you took it at per head. So I think that would be a good kind of corporate thing to think about investing as a benefit, is internet.
Nice. That's a great point. And everybody, I'm sure, especially with everything going on, cost saving is probably a big part of how a lot of leaderships are looking at how they're going to build their team. So that's a really great point. I think we have a little bit less than 10 minutes left, but I know we have really good questions coming in. So I saw one that was around, sorry, they keep moving. So where do you guys tend to see pushback from within an organization against remote work happening? Is that from leadership? Is it around newer people who might not feel comfortable yet? And how do you combat those issues or that pushback?
I can speak to that one, and this again from personal experience. So I'm located in the United States, and my previous employer was located in Europe. And for many, many years, I navigated that without any problem at all. The time zone differences, even with working in people in Bangalore, where we have a 9.5, 10.5 hour time difference, we managed it. I came in early, you know, they came in later. But what happened is management changed, and management had this idea that you had to be on site and everyone had to be co-located. And if you weren't co-located or at least in the same time zone, then you couldn't be effective. So they didn't really look at any of the history of, you know, how effective our team had been over the years. We had no complaints from within the team and the people that worked on it, but it was management's view that they could be more efficient if they had that co-location. So I was let go because I'm based in the United States. And what they found, in fact, is that was absolutely not true. And, you know, they let myself and some other people go that were very talented, had a lot of history, a lot of benefit to bring. So the push did come from management, and management learned that they had made a mistake. And now they're going back to the model of hiring the most talented person for the job wherever that person might sit, and then letting the people deal with the time zone differences, the communication, whatever. So it came full circle for them. But it was unfortunate that they lost that time, because they lost, you know, a year for them to learn that lesson. But I'm hopeful that other companies will not make that mistake, that they'll see this remote working and they'll see the value that people can bring regardless of where you sit. And all of us that work remote, we've all had to deal with time zone issues and location issues, and we've all figured out how to do it. So I don't see it as a blocker at our level, but I think management sometimes they want that body in the chair.
They want you seatbelt in.
Yep.
But I think it comes from a scarcity mindset and a fearful mind. It comes from fear, except for those certain careers where you've got to be in this space. Like I'm thinking about essential workers right now, and they have to be in the space because that's where patient care is or customer care is. But I would say a lot of it comes from fear, just unsure and unaware of, can this work? Can I trust them? Which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, and it also connects to just kind of traditions and even if you looked at by discipline. So in sales, a former sales manager said, you have to get your face in a place, because then the customer is going to think, you took the time. It's a big time chunk to go there, and then you're more valuable. And so if we hold on to those constructs, similarly, some companies in Japan, the employee doesn't want to leave till the boss leaves because that's respectful. That shows that they're working really hard to support the team. But holding on to those types of traditions are going to hold us back, I think, long term, because like you said, we can be very productive not in an office. And it doesn't mean we disrespect our boss or the customer if we're not physically there, if we're still present and can deliver.
I think it also has to do with your comfort level with technology. So if you're just never had to really use it and had assistance, or you're always in the office and talking to your peers and your team, and all of a sudden now they're not there and you have to adopt technology that you've never had to use before, especially if we're talking about people in leadership positions, that could be sometimes embarrassing, or certainly something that they're going to put a lot of resistance around. So being unfamiliar with the technology that can help remote work can sometimes hamper it as well.
That's a good point. And then I think we have time for one more question, and one I really liked, especially since BTG, Breaking the Glass, we're a professional networking group, and now we're all remote, and it's a little bit harder to get together and network. What's a piece of advice that everybody has on continuing things like mentorship while we're all working remotely, not able to get together for coffee or a happy hour or whatever it might be? How can you still continue to get those nurturing relationships?
I think it's great almost just schedule really short things, because sometimes even if you were to do coffee, everyone thinks like an hour, and we know hours are limited. So with the flexibility now, if you want to meet up with a mentor or mentee, but keep it like even smaller, discrete blocks, it can really help. Then you could actually have a bunch of people, potentially. You could do 4 people in an hour, right? So you get to build your network like that.
Love that.
Yeah, it almost opens up to finding new people to either mentor or be your mentor. You're not in an office. It's not just the people within your organization. Right now, there's a lot of these types of webinars going on. There's a lot of networks that are hosting big online virtual meetings where if I were in a room, I may never have spoken to you, and now I'm able to hear what you have to say during that meeting. So remote almost opens doors that you wouldn't have available if you were in an office from 9 to 5.
That's a good point. I like that.
I would say maintaining those mentorships and those connections. What I like about remote is that you get to find the creativity that works for you in that relationship. So, if you've got this person that, you need to break the ice a little bit, have a virtual game night first, because those are a thing, and they're getting pretty popular right now. Or, if you want to keep the connection with someone and you just need to send them an email and they need to send you one back, you can switch your communication method to a new way that also appreciates the mentor or the connection. Because we're in such a, like, I don't want to say lawless situation, but like there are no rules, right? It's so we can fill in those spaces that were not quite traditional, but we know will work for someone. And they can do the same for us. In return, it's also showing some connection and some awareness of your individuality too. Yeah. So I'd say finding the right tool for that connection can only kind of blossom that connection in a new way.
And I think too, just, you know, when we're talking about the virtual mentorship, it's kind of in a way almost like these virtual happy hours, where I know I've seen people in an office situation where maybe they want to go in one direction and they want mentorship in one direction, but kind of the peer pressure and people watching and listening drives them in another direction. And this isn't true for everyone by any stretch, but for people that do struggle with what is their space, what is their place, how do they belong, I think the virtual and the remote gives you a little more freedom. Because you don't have the same peer pressure. You may have some, but it's completely different. And I think you have a little more personal freedom should you choose to avail yourself of that personal freedom.
Awesome. Great advice all around. I also think a cool part of how we're all connecting now is we are seeing a lot more of what people want to bring to the table. I know my dog has been involved in tons of my virtual things and seeing people's families and homes. And it's, you know, I'm sure it's not super comfortable for everybody. I've found it a nice little perk to be able to just see a little bit more of somebody that I work with or I'm looking for mentorship for, anything along those lines. So it's just cool to kind of really see people as people rather than a colleague or a boss or a mentor or whatever it might be on that front too. So I've enjoyed that side of things a lot. Well, I think we're probably right around our time. I really, really, really want to thank all of our participants for coming and listening and asking questions, and very importantly, our panelists as well for coming and being really open and chatting with us around not always an easy topic, especially with everything going on, but I think a very important one. So it was really lovely to have you guys.
Thank you.
And thanks to all you guys. You did a great job hosting and taking care of the questions. Yes. Really, really nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo everything that Sammy said, you know, also thank you to all the attendees that came on. It was amazing seeing everyone from all over the nation and even internationally plug in today. So that was amazing. We are saving the chat and taking note of all the questions that you sent in. So if we weren't able to address anything, you know, we'll shoot them out, give you a great response. You know, we still have to go back to work today, so we can't hang out forever. But yeah, thank you for participating. Thank you, Marlene, Terry, Maggie, Ellen, for joining us on our panel. Sammy, you were an amazing moderator. Can you believe that was your first time doing that? And yeah, so Breaking the Glass is always open to new collaboration opportunities. If you're interested in participating as a speaker, we have a large array of topics, so let me know what you're passionate about. And we can probably find something to get you slotted into. Additionally, if you are looking for programming for your ERG groups or just your work, we can create one of these webinars for you with your D&I goals in mind. And yeah, develop a program that's specialized for you. So I just sent out our contact information. We'll be able to follow up again. But thank you again so much, and hope to see everyone on our next webinar with the founders of Crikey next week. It'll be great.
Woo!
Woo. All right, y'all have a great one.
Thanks, all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.